Thank you, and I'll hand the stage over to you. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. I just realized that we are the last sessions before the break, right? So, I don't want to hold people too long before you have a break and networking. So it's somehow give us around 25 minutes, right, for us to share some of the exciting insights from our unicorns. So today, we have it's with great pleasure that we have 3 of our unicorns with us, today. And you are the ones that have made it, right, to the unicorns. And I'm sure that from the audience and the investors as well as all the startups, they want to hear about all these experience that you have gained throughout your journey. So probably the first thing I want to ask you is, probably the only thing that we could be certain in the new normal is uncertainties and all these ever-changing market dynamics. So, with pandemic, with all these geopolitical issues, and all these new dynamics, can you share with us how you guys actually handled it? Probably in the last 12, 24 months. Okay, shall we get started with Jessica?
Sure, thanks, Eric. It's great to be here, by the way. It's good to see so many faces in a room, although obviously with COVID protocols intact. What I would say at WeLab is we're an 8-year-old company. We've been through a lot of roller coaster rides over the years, so be it pandemic or otherwise, I think every day is different in terms of how we need to deal with the changes in the world and changes in the business. I think there is a heightened difficulty, not just for the fintech industry, but not just Hong Kong, but everyone. And so, yes, we've definitely had to change the way in which we operate. However, whether that's working from home, whether that's learning to work remotely, how to work with partners, how to work with business affiliates, right? So there's definitely the physical aspect that's had to change a lot. Certain processes can't be done physically. How can we do that remotely? But I think one of the things that absolutely is the most key is actually the mindset change that we've had to adapt to, both with ourselves and our business partners. And that could be the investors, that could be, banks or, partners that we work with. Initially, we always had to sign physical documents. That's the lowest of the low. But I think the second thing is just being comfortable in having meetings and having efficient discussions via Zoom. That is a very low bar, but it's actually become part and parcel of our lives. But more importantly, and the area which we have found to be the most exciting, and unfortunately as a beneficiary that's come out of COVID, is the mindset of the willingness to try new things. And that particularly is as it relates to the adoption of digital financial services. And with that, as we operate a virtual bank, as we operate all our businesses digitally and online, we found that to be one small silver lining that's come out of COVID, which is the willingness to at least try, to be a little bit less apprehensive. And because you physically can't go out, why don't we give this a go in terms of, can you really open a bank account in 5 minutes? Can you really fully transact and do everything? And when the answer is yes, and when the response is, oh, that was actually quite easy and quite painless, then the tolerance and the willingness improves. So with that, that is one silver lining, but ultimately the key thing is how do we change our mindset internally and how we change our customers and our business partners' mindset. And I can go on for much longer, but those are the cliff notes which I found to be sort of the most encouraging that's come out of the pandemic.
And Shang, right? Probably travel industry is the most hit one, right? During the pandemic, can you share with us how you handled it?
Yeah, so I joined Klook December 2019. So all my friends and family says I have perfect timing in terms of joining a travel company right before the pandemic. Now, I think the theme of this forum is about resiliency and growth. And as venture capital and startups, we all talk about innovation, right? So what exactly is resiliency? It's basically preparing yourself for the unthinkable. For the travel industry, most of our peers, we saw revenue basically disappear. So it went to zero, right? At the height of the tightening and the restriction. So how do you continue to operate to ensure the safety of your customers, the safety of your employees, making sure your merchants, many of them are small, medium enterprises, can continue operating. So I think making sure that you prepare for the worst, prepare for the uncertainty is important. And for Klook, what we have always done, and that's why capital is really important, is we always fundraise in advance, right? So we fundraise out of strength when we actually don't need the money, rather than when we need the money. So that's probably advice number one for a lot of startups that may be here or joining us virtually. So after you survive, then you think about what are the innovations that you can do. Now, a lot of people in Hong Kong probably associate Klook with the term staycation, right? I heard of it before when I was in Singapore, but I didn't really hear it in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong, we're notoriously known to travel cross-border 4 or 5 times a year. Japan, Singapore, Thailand, Korea. But when we can't travel, what do you do? What surprised us is consumers still want to do a lot of stuff. So we combine hotels with tours and activities, making it a more holistic experience. And what we saw is, to our surprise, revenue has now exceeded pre-COVID in Hong Kong. So with the right innovation, with the right engagement with the consumers, you can definitely achieve growth. So really, I think I completely agree with Eric. I think what we can expect going forward is a lot more uncertainty, a lot more change. Rather than be fearful of it, I think we should really definitely embrace it, because it's a new opportunity, and we never had thought we can continue to grow our business in the current environment, but we're able to do so.
Thank you. And so we also have Evan from Animoca Brands, our latest unicorns, from our community. While everybody is, rethinking about the strategy, but you guys actually, make it to the top, right, to the heights. So can you share with us how did you manage, especially on, all these uncertainties?
Well, picking up on the theme of resilience and insistence, actually, without COVID, we probably wouldn't have gotten there. Honestly, where we were was a company sort of, we were doing well. We were a little bit ahead of its times in a way, because Animoca, what it does is we advocate true digital ownership via very hot thing right now, which is NFTs and metaverses, right? So we truly believe in the future of a hybrid future of how the physical world and the virtual world would be actually blurred as we go forward, right? And we were very early in doing this. Animoca was actually a ASX listed company before. It was delisted in 2019. And that was actually a very, very difficult period for the company. And its delisting happened because of our insistence of knowing who we are and what we're trying to achieve. So not all exchanges or stock exchanges actually understand what we do. Tokenizing assets, using cryptocurrency in between and actually getting to those assets and advocating for true digital ownership that we believe would transform the world and how open metaverses ought to look like. Now, in doing this, to be that insistent in doing what we're doing, we believe that what happened during the COVID times was that people actually discover a lot of their lives can be lived under Zoom environments, virtual environment, and without meeting. And in fact, a lot of meetings, a lot of business leaders I've spoken to actually said that their days are very efficient. Now, obviously, to be honest, seeing all of you here, is in the hybrid format, it's actually quite reassuring that there's still human touch. I'm pretty traditional in the way I do business. I do still want to see people, but it's amazing what you can do in the virtual world. Now, once you discover that, and you can see that the likes of Netflix, the likes of many other gaming environments and gaming stocks have sort of really risen. You can see why there's such an interest in us, right? So for us, what we had to do is to stay true to ourselves, and we would transform very quickly as well once we have built F1 Delta Time to be a successful product in its own ecosystem, the sandbox. Then we started to look into other ecosystem partners along the chain, being a little bit acquisitive, as well as being really aggressive in investments to stay ahead. So ultimately, I think this period has actually brought us more opportunities. In the gaming space, it's $160 billion, and we believe that there's a lot to be understood from the gamers. They can really understand what tokenizing is, they can understand what virtual assets are, and they can understand the power of what entering metaverses would be like. So actually, it's been good for us.
Thank you. So we've just heard from Steve Hoffman about using DNA as storage, right? I think we're not there yet, right? So, but then I've always been told that it's actually in the DNAs of startups is really agility. And also, I'm sure, along the way, you must have hit the wall, at times. And I really want to know, what does it really mean? I mean, how did you actually manage to, get through those hurdles and probably reorient to the directions that has actually enabled you to make it to where you are, right? So maybe we start with Shang this time.
Yeah, we have more than 1,000 employees globally, most of it in Asia Pacific. And I think the importance is communication, particularly in crisis, really to make sure that the people that you work with, we all continue to share a common vision. And for Klook, it's really about enabling consumers to really discover book experiences that bring joy to life, right? I think that's really important, particularly a lot of people have pent-up fever about being in Hong Kong for so long. How do you continue to find things that bring joyful moments? And so we were able to really quickly communicate with the vast majority of our colleagues, and we're really focused on, okay, we previously did 90% of our businesses cross-border. Now that cross-border is restricted and limited in Asia, what can we do? So we replicated our success in Hong Kong and many other markets, such as Singapore, such as Taiwan, such as Korea, because people still have that need, the fundamental need of seeking happiness, doing things with their families and friends, perhaps in a different protocol, like today, we're a hybrid model. And so we continue to use technology to help consumer better connect with merchants that have interesting product and services to offer. Like for example, we did Fly to Nowhere, which is a very interesting concept. We did Klook Live. We allowed consumers in Southeast Asia who perhaps cannot go outside their home to do virtual tours as well. So again, I think the key is really to kind of communicate and making sure that your team, which is the fundamental assets for a lot of startups, is sharing the same vision, and then so we can go much faster towards the same path.
Thank you. And Jessica, as a virtual bank, you're working in a highly regulated environment. So what does it mean to you in terms of agility and reacting to the market?
Well, we operate a number of businesses. A virtual bank is one of them. But being in the financial sector, there are, in Hong Kong and in mainland China and in Indonesia, obviously, there are a lot more rules and regulations that we need to deal with. I agree with Shang in the sense that communication is very key, and both internally and externally. And internally with your employees to have a common goal, common vision of where you're going. Externally with your customers in terms of ultimately what they need, but also with regulators or other business partners and stakeholders. Ultimately talk through it. We need to be resilient right now, but resilient with a splash of innovation. Is that something we're comfortable with, right? This is the time to use a sandbox concept to test something out. This is the moment where we should all be actually taking that risk, or should we not? So it is really about communication. And it is precisely these opportunities that, being agile and having that right mindset, having the right foundation with the team, that we can actually pounce and act on it very quickly. If I started building that concept today from scratch and assembling a team, I don't know how long it will be. When we launched our virtual bank, we launched it in the third wave of the pandemic in July of 2020. A lot of people thought we were crazy because that was the height of the pandemic. But we started building that 12 to 15 months before when we got the license. And if we hadn't set that foundation in the platform, we wouldn't have been able to launch. So I think there is actually a lot of foresight and planning, but you need to be bold and you need to have a view and you need to stick with it. That's why investors always talk about a J-curve. There is a very real J-curve. There is an investment period that you need to harvest in your portfolio companies before they get to fruition. You do not become profitable the next month. It doesn't work like that. And I think with communication, with the like-minded people that you talk to, they will understand the process and the journey you're going through. But having said that, I think in terms of being agile and being, resilient, a little bit of an oxymoron, but not really, because, you need to be able to be agile, but actually be able to execute on that part of it. You don't just say, oh yeah, I'm really agile, I can do all this, but never actually commit to it. So I think the key thing is when you're going through a difficult patch, do you look at this as, oh my gosh, we gotta hunker down, not do anything because it's too risky? Or is that actually the opportunity where you're like, this is the absolute opportunity where we should double down and accelerate the pace at which we do things? And I think for us, if you have enough conviction in what you're doing and you are comfortable with your environment and the stakeholders around you, that is the opportunity and that is the time that you will have winners that will come out. Now, obviously in a regulated environment, you need to make calculated risk assessments. But there is always, a risk-weighted assessment in terms of whether you will take that risk or not. But people always ask us, what should startups do? And I think it is have a view, have a hypothesis that you want to test, but also be willing to take that risk. Because if you don't, then you're never going to get anything out of it. And so at the end of the day, I do think it is important, but we do need to be balanced. So that is the little caveat that I will put at the end of that one.
Thank you, Jessica. And Evan, we thought, gaming is less regulated, but suddenly, what happens? So how did you guys, react to all these changing market dynamics and kind of, find your way through it?
Well, we're still not in a space where we're fully regulated yet. And frankly speaking, I'm personally, neither is a company, afraid of regulation because that's how the industry would grow up, right? In fact, I would proactively stand on the ground of working with regulators to see how can we shape a healthy ecosystem. Because right now, in the crypto space especially, there's just a little bit too much speculation, right? There's a lot of stuff that's real that the community is building, but there's also too much misinformation and also speculation, so we're not afraid of it. But going back to that question of agility, it's the DNA, right, of what each tech company ought to have. And for us, really what it means is that we have to try different things, make quick decisions, fail very quickly, and we have to encourage our employees to do the same. Don't be afraid of it. Make mistakes, but learn from those mistakes and see what we can do, right? So come and, agility is a bit about, being quick with your decision, not afraid of trying new things, failing quickly. But then in terms of like pulling back in the big picture, in terms of trying to do what we're trying to achieve, we have the DNA of building games, right? That's sort of like the origins of Animoca, building mobile games. And but as you're able to make a successful one, then you will look out and say that, okay, well, within the Hong Kong space where there's a narrow talent pool, how can you extend your influence to a global scale in actually advocating the open metaverse world that we see ourselves being in? So we have to search worldwide. So we believe that we have company DNA, at least especially management team, to be global, to think globally. So we search all over and look for investment and acquisition opportunities. That's another form of agility that we see. So we take majority share sometimes if we believe that we can really shape the company. We sometimes take minority share if we believe that what they understand is probably gaming, but they may not understand blockchain. We'll help them with it. So we determine what is at our core of what the value add is, and then we can go in there and say, okay, that's what we do. The agile element is that we're not insistent on operating. So the combination of how we see ourselves right now in terms of investing and operating goes with full synergy. Where it sits on top of it is sort of like what we call the know-how, the deep know-how about blockchain and how the worlds ought to evolve would actually then fuel our operating side, and then the operating side, once we have a track record, would lead to investment opportunities. Therefore, right now, a lot of the investment in this space on a worldwide basis is coming to us. So we are becoming a good investor as well.
Thank you. So after all, this is a investment event. So here comes the moment of truth, right? So we have many investors here with us, and also many startups looking, for investors. As a unicorn, you have definitely been very successful in convincing, investors to believe, in your dreams and all these, business plan. So I want to understand from you, how do you manage, the expectation of the investors, and kind of, align, their demands, with your business vision and missions, right? So could we start with Jessica, please?
Depends on their investment style to begin with. It really, really varies. There are some who constantly want information and want to talk to you all the time, right? And want to know every single nitty-gritty piece of detail. There are those as just tell me how we're doing, everything is good, I want to talk to you once a year. It's a very passive investment. So I think the first thing is to understand, what are you looking for? How is the best way for us to play out this relationship so that it becomes a win-win relationship and partnership going forward? So I think it's a little bit of KYC. It's about know your customer, know your audience. What do they really want to hear at the end of the day? And some are very focused on thematics, right? It is, you're investing in a lot of growth in a high growth region like Southeast Asia, in which I'm interested in. How can we help you there? For some, it's purely a financial investment. So it comes down to, how do you communicate with that party and what are your expectations? Some are just very supportive in terms of, we are huge believers in financial services. All tech companies say they want to be a fintech, but actually they don't have the financial expertise in which you have, because you are actually a financial DNA with a tech overlay and the startup overlay, which we like. So ultimately it is really knowing your audience and how and where they want to get to. But I think communication is important in terms of alignment of objectives, right? Is there a forced exit on the horizon? Is there a timing? Oh, plans have changed, or plans are on track, or what have they? Oh, you know what, we've decided to pivot and explore this new product because COVID has hit and we've had to do something different. It's about communication. It is about giving a clear vision, particularly when you have a strong management team, to tell them why you are doing this. So it's not just like, oh, this company is going off the rails and going into a completely different sphere and universe, right? So it's a lot about explanation and reminding them of, why did you invest in us in the first place? This was the direction, the vision of why we're doing this. And when we expanded into new markets, that was always very comfortable with our investors and our shareholders, because they knew from the beginning that we started in Hong Kong, moved to mainland China, but the vision was always to be a pan-Asia financial services player, which we have now achieved through going to Southeast Asia and Indonesia. So, but doesn't stop. So we've always had the vision. It was about, how do we execute on all these steps? So the communication part is extremely critical. And if, for example, throwing this out there, if we suddenly decide, you know what, Pan-Asia was great, but now we're going to tackle something beyond Pan-Asia, that is also okay, right? But there needs to be a bit more thought behind, why are you doing this, and then the explanation behind it. Companies do revisits of 5-year strategic plans or 10-year strategic plans all the time. It is okay to pivot, but there needs to be some basis and rationale behind that. So never stay static. If the world changes and the wind changes, it is perfectly okay to change. But there needs to be basis, as opposed to, you know what, I just felt like it, and I'm just going to go for it today. So that I would recommend.
Thank you. And Evan?
Yeah, well, managing investors, right, that's what we all do. It seems like half the time we're doing that nowadays, right, especially with startups, you would know. But for us, it's a matter of creating that transparency and, by the way, authenticity of the company about what we are, who we are, and why we're worth what we're worth. We're obviously, we have now, we're doing very well. Our revenue is, we're cash flow positive and everything. In fact, we announced that 2 weeks ago, we made our 2.2 billion round, raising 65 million. In fact, we're going to raise our next round right now, so at higher valuation, obviously. So a lot of my life right now is seeing investors, and there's a lot of interest. And ultimately, it's about all the investments we've made. And a lot of times what investors do is kind of like, what are the couple of things that you're doing that really make you worth what you're worth? That sort of states the present. And you just say about, well, this is going to become this other project is going to become that. And just a couple of statements that would say why you're worth what you're worth currently. It's easier for investors to digest, right? Okay, I remember these couple of strong value creators that are what is worth today can have future growth. Then you would discuss what a few other things that you have in play that would make it worth much, much more. So there's an investment case. So aside from being dissected on financials through due diligence, which I'm sure Shang and Jessica knows a lot about, which is what we do, you do have to give them a couple of talking points that when they themselves go up to their investment committee, it's easy to say a yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to echo on that point about transparency. So we actually look at a lot of business and strategic investments, and I'm always very fearful of those companies that only has good things. When I was an ex-banker, for some of my clients, the risk factor, you were right, managing high growth is a risk factor. And you think that you're just kind of bragging about yourself, but when I actually started joining startups, you realize managing 100% growth a year, it's actually very difficult, right? So for investors, I think they want to hear the truth. They want to create value together with you. And I think every company's, particularly startup, would at least have a handful of difficulties. And so the fact that you can be transparent with your investors, they can together help you resolve it, and along the process, create a lot more value for the overall firm. So I think in terms of communication with the shareholders and investors, it's about offering a transparent view on what you're doing well, what you will continue to scale up, and what are perhaps some of your challenges or questions you have about your business that they can give you input on. And so it's a co-creation of a growing company.
So I think we are running out of time, and I would probably call this an end to our panel. And thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm sure that you guys could approach our unicorns during the break and learn more from them. And with that, thank you so much for attending. Thank you.